Reality doesn't arrive instantly. Look around you for a moment. The screen in front of you, the room around you, the sounds in the distance. Everything feels immediate. It feels as if reality is unfolding directly in front of your eyes, moment by moment, exactly as it happens. But that feeling is deceptive. The truth is that reality doesn't arrive instantly. In fact, by the time you become aware of anything, a surprising amount of time has already passed. To understand why, we need to start with something simple. Information has to travel. Take light, for example. The light reflecting from the objects around you must first travel to your eyes. That journey is incredibly fast, moving at nearly 300 million meters per second, which is why it seems instantaneous in everyday life. But even then, it isn't truly immediate. The information must still reach you before you can experience it. Then something even more remarkable happens. The light entering your eyes is converted into electrical signals. Those signals travel through the optic nerve and into different regions of your brain, where they are processed, interpreted, compared with previous experiences, and assembled into what you recognize as a visual scene. The same thing happens with sound. A person's voice travels through the air as pressure waves before reaching your ears. Your auditory system converts those vibrations into neural signals. Those signals then travel through complex networks inside your brain before you become consciously aware of hearing them. Touch works the same way. Smell works the same way. Every sense depends on information traveling, being processed, and finally being interpreted. And all of that takes time. Not a huge amount of time. Usually only fractions of a second. But those fractions matter more than most people realize. Because during that brief delay, the world keeps moving. The earth continues spinning. People continue speaking. Objects continue changing. Reality keeps advancing forward, while your brain is still processing what already happened. This creates a strange conclusion. The version of reality you experience is never the reality that exists at this exact instant. It is a carefully reconstructed version of reality from a moment ago. You don't notice this delay because your brain is extraordinarily efficient. It hides the processing from you. It presents a seamless experience that feels perfectly immediate. But beneath that smooth illusion lies a fascinating truth. Everything you see, hear, and feel has already completed a journey before it enters your awareness. And one scientist began measuring just how long that journey takes. They uncovered something even stranger than a simple delay. The hidden delay inside every experience. If reality doesn't arrive instantly, the next question is obvious. How much delay are we actually talking about? The answer is surprisingly difficult to pin down, because your brain isn't processing just one stream of information. At every moment, billions of neurons are handling signals from your eyes, ears, skin, and countless other sources. Before you become consciously aware of anything, all of that information must be organized into a single, coherent experience. Imagine watching someone clap their hands while speaking. The light from their movement and the sound of the clap reach you through completely different pathways. Yet somehow, you don't experience them as separate events. Your brain merges them into one seamless moment. That ability is extraordinary, but it comes at a cost. Time. Visual information can take tens to hundreds of milliseconds to be processed. Auditory information follows its own processing route. Signals from touch travel at different speeds depending on where they originate in the body. Before conscious awareness can emerge, the brain must collect these signals, compare them, synchronize them, and construct a unified experience. In other words, your awareness is not receiving reality directly. It is receiving a finished report. For decades, scientists assumed consciousness simply observed the results of this process. Then a series of experiments began to challenge that assumption. Researchers discovered something unsettling. When people were asked to perform simple actions, such as pressing a button whenever they felt like it, measurable activity appeared inside the brain before the participants reported making a conscious decision. The brain seemed to be preparing for action before the person became aware of choosing it. At first, this result sounded impossible. After all, common sense tells us that conscious decisions come first. We decide, then we act. But the data suggested a different sequence. First, unconscious brain activity begins. Then, a fraction of a second later, conscious awareness catches up. The implications were profound. If awareness arrives after important neural processes have already started, then consciousness may not be leading the process as much as we imagine, and this isn't limited to decisions. Many neuroscientists now believe that what we experience as the present moment is actually a carefully assembled reconstruction that appears only after the brain has finished its work behind the scenes. The delay is small, so small that you never notice it, yet it raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if the feeling of being fully present in the moment is itself part of the brain's construction? And what if the decisions you believe you're making right now began before you were even aware of them? The experiment that shook our understanding of free will. For most of human history, the sequence seemed obvious. First, you decide to do something. Then, your brain sends the necessary signals. Finally, your body acts. It feels so natural that few people ever question it. Right now, if you decide to raise your hand, it seems as though the conscious decision comes first and the movement follows. Cause and effect appear perfectly clear. But in the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet conducted an experiment that would challenge this assumption in a dramatic way. The experiment itself was surprisingly simple. Participants sat in front of a clock-like device and were instructed to flex their wrists whenever they felt the urge. At the same time, electrodes measured electrical activity inside their brains. The participants were also asked to note the exact moment they became consciously aware of their decision to move. The expectation seemed straightforward. The conscious decision should appear first. Then the brain activity should follow. Instead, the results revealed something unexpected. A measurable burst in neural activity appeared before the participants reported making a conscious choice. In some cases, the brain seemed to begin preparing the movement hundreds of milliseconds before the person became aware of deciding. Think about what that means. According to the data, the brain was already moving toward a decision while the conscious mind still believed nothing had happened. The findings sparked immediate controversy. Some scientists argued that free will was an illusion. Others believed the results were being misinterpreted. Philosophers entered the debate. Neuroscientists repeated and refined the experiments. Decades later, the discussion continues. But regardless of where someone stands, one fact remains difficult to ignore. The conscious experience of deciding appears to arrive late. Once again, awareness seems to be trailing behind processes already unfolding beneath the surface. This creates a fascinating possibility. Perhaps consciousness is less like a commander giving orders and more like a narrator receiving updates from a much larger system operating behind the scenes. That doesn't necessarily mean you lack free will. The question is far more complicated than that. Yet the experiment revealed something deeply unsettling about the relationship between awareness and action. The conscious you may not be initiating every event. It may be witnessing events that have already begun. And if your awareness is arriving after decisions start forming, another question becomes impossible to avoid. If consciousness isn't directly experiencing reality as it happens, then how much of what you call reality is actually being constructed before it reaches you? To answer that question, we need to examine an even stranger idea, one that suggests your brain may not be passively observing the world at all. It may be actively creating the version of reality you experience every second of your life. Your brain never sees reality. At this point, you might still imagine the brain as a kind of biological camera. Information enters through your senses, travels into your brain, and then appears in your awareness. Delayed, perhaps, but still fundamentally accurate. For a long time, scientists thought something similar. Today, however, a growing number of neuroscientists believe the process works very differently. Your brain is not simply observing reality. It is predicting it. This idea is known as predictive processing, and it has transformed how many researchers think about perception. According to this view, the brain is constantly generating a model of the world before sensory information even arrives. Rather than waiting passively for data, it makes educated guesses about what is likely to happen next. Then it compares those predictions against incoming information and updates the model when necessary. In a sense, your brain is always trying to stay one step ahead of reality. Consider how astonishing this is. The world around you is unbelievably complex. Every second, your eyes receive enormous amounts of visual information. Processing every detail from scratch would be far too slow. Instead, the brain takes shortcuts. It predicts what should be there and focuses primarily on detecting errors in those predictions. This is one reason optical illusions are so powerful. When you look at an illusion, your eyes are receiving one set of information, but your brain's predictions push you toward a different interpretation. You aren't seeing reality exactly as it is. You're seeing the brain's best guess about what reality should be. The same principle appears in your blind spot. Every human eye contains a small area where the optic nerve exits the retina. This region cannot detect light, meaning there is literally missing information in your visual field. Yet, you never notice a hole in your vision. Why? Because your brain fills it in automatically. Without asking permission, it invents the missing details and presents them as reality. Think about what that means. Part of what you see right now is not being observed at all. It is being generated. And vision is only the beginning. The brain constantly predicts sounds, movements, language, emotions, and even the behavior of other people. In many situations, what reaches awareness is not raw sensory information, but a carefully edited version of reality that has already been interpreted, corrected, and reconstructed. The implications are profound. If your brain is actively constructing your experience, then perception is not a simple window into the world. It is a collaboration between incoming information and internal prediction. You do not experience reality directly. You experience a model refined over millions of years of evolution, optimized not necessarily for truth, but for survival. And one scientist began examining how this predictive system relates to our experience of time. They discovered something even more unsettling. The present moment itself may not be what it seems. Consciousness, the greatest unsolved mystery. By now, we've uncovered a series of increasingly strange discoveries. Reality reaches your brain with a delay. Your awareness seems to arrive after important neural processes have already begun. Your perception is partly constructed through prediction. Even the present moment may be a carefully assembled representation rather than a direct experience of reality. But all of these discoveries point toward an even deeper question. Who or what is experiencing all of this? This is where neuroscience encounters one of its greatest mysteries. Scientists have made extraordinary progress in understanding the brain. They can identify regions involved in vision, memory, language, decision-making, and emotion. They can observe neurons communicating through vast electrical networks. They can even predict certain choices before people become consciously aware of making them. Yet, one question remains stubbornly unanswered. Why does any of this feel like something? Consider a computer. It processes information, performs calculations, stores memories, and responds to inputs. But as far as we know, there is no inner experience accompanying those operations. The computer does not feel the color red. It does not experience the taste of food. It does not possess an awareness of its own existence. Humans do. Somewhere within the activity of billions of neurons emerges a subjective experience, a private inner world of thoughts, sensations, emotions, and awareness. This puzzle is often called the hard problem of consciousness. Not because consciousness is difficult to study, but because scientists still do not understand why physical processes inside the brain should generate subjective experience at all. The mystery becomes even more profound when viewed through everything we discussed so far. If your brain is constructing a model of reality, then consciousness is not directly experiencing the external world. It is experiencing the brain's representation of the world. If awareness arrives after unconscious processing, then consciousness may not be initiating every event. It may be receiving the results of processes already underway. And if the present moment itself is partly constructed, then consciousness exists within a reality that has already been edited before it arrives. This realization can feel unsettling at first, but it may also reveal something extraordinary. Perhaps consciousness is not simply a passive observer trapped inside the brain. Perhaps it is the final stage of a vast process that transforms raw physical information into meaningful experience. The challenge is that no one yet knows exactly how that transformation occurs. Despite decades of research, the bridge between neural activity and subjective awareness remains one of the deepest unanswered questions in science. And that uncertainty leads us to a surprising conclusion. Because if consciousness experiences a reality that is delayed, predicted, reconstructed, and assembled, then what we call living in the present may be very different from what we have always assumed.